I don't know what I expected when I walked out that morning. Maybe silence. Maybe relief. Maybe deep down I hoped she'd come after me. But she didn't, and so I disappeared. It wasn't planned. I didn't pack bags in secret or rehearse some dramatic exit. I just stood there in the doorway of the home we built together and realized I couldn't carry both of our hearts anymore. Mine was already breaking and hers hadn't been in it for a long time. Her name is Lena. We met in our 20s when life was still loud and wild and full of spark. I remember the way she'd tilt her head when she laughed at something I said, like I'd surprised her, like she actually saw me. Somewhere along the way, she stopped looking. It's strange how love fades. Not like a fire. Fires go out quickly. More like a song you can't quite hear anymore. The melody used to follow me everywhere. Now it was background noise. We didn't fight often. That was part of the problem. Everything between us became neutral, calm, chilly. She'd be on her phone at night, smiling at something, then turning the screen when I walked by. I'd ask about her day, and she'd answer with one-word replies. Fine. Busy. Tired. I kept telling myself it was just a phase, that we'd reconnect, that couples go through this. But one night, I woke up and realized I didn't remember the last time she reached for me. And still, I didn't leave. Not then. I stayed for months, pretending not to notice the emotional distance, clinging to small moments like they were proof of something still real. I told myself I was being loyal, that marriage means staying even when it hurts, that love means patience. But patience without hope becomes silence. And silence, it's a form of grief. The morning I left, she didn't even ask where I was going. Just sipped her coffee and scrolled through her phone like I was air. So I walked out. No note, no keys left behind, no goodbye. I thought that would be the end of our story. I really did. But then weeks later, just when I had started breathing differently, started imagining a life without her shadow, she knocked on my door. It had been 27 days. Not that I was counting in the beginning, but that's how grief works when you're not allowed to call it grief. You mark time in strange ways. How long it's been since her voice echoed down the hallway. Since you heard the soft clink of her coffee cup on the counter. Since her presence, even in silence, was still a kind of comfort. 27 mornings of waking up to the sound of nothing and pretending that nothing was peace. I didn't move far. Just across town to a short-term rental with too much space for one person. It had mismatched furniture, beige walls, and a slow dripping faucet that kept me up most nights. But it was quiet, and more importantly, it was mine. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to shrink to fit the shape of someone else's expectations. And I thought she was done with me. I'd made it easy. No messy arguments, no accusations. I didn't beg for answers or slam doors on the way out. I gave her exactly what she'd spent the last year acting like she wanted. Space, freedom, and exit without friction. So when the knock came just after sunset, it didn't even register at first. I thought it was a neighbor, a delivery at the wrong door. Maybe even a kid selling cookies. I opened it with the blank expression of someone who expects nothing. And there she was, Lena, hair tied back the way she wore it when she was nervous. No makeup, a hoodie I'd seen her wear 100 times, but never expected to see again. Her eyes were red, not from crying, not just that, but from exhaustion, like she hadn't slept properly in days. We stood there staring at each other for what felt like a lifetime. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "I didn't think you'd open," she finally whispered. I almost didn't. The truth sat there between us, heavier than the air. She glanced past me toward the narrow hallway inside. I didn't move. "I thought," she started, but didn't finish. Just shook her head and looked down at her hands, which were trembling slightly. "I thought maybe you'd be somewhere else by now, with someone else." I could have laughed. I could have told her that I'd barely left this place, that the only warmth I'd felt since walking out was from the radiator I fixed myself on day 5, that her absence hadn't freed me. It had only clarified the size of the hole she left behind. But I said nothing. She looked up. "Can I come in?" And that's when it hit me. She still didn't understand. She thought this was about a fight, a misstep, something that could be talked through with apologies and late-night confessions. She hadn't realized I hadn't left the house. I'd left her fully, quietly, irreversibly. Still, I stepped aside. She walked in slowly, like she didn't trust the floor beneath her, like it might crumble under the weight of everything she wasn't saying. I watched her take in the sparse apartment, the bare counters, the half-drunk mug of tea on the table. This place is, she paused, cold. Better than being invisible. That landed. I saw it in her eyes, a flicker of guilt, maybe even recognition. She sank into the edge of the couch like her body had given up holding itself up. I've been messed up, she said. Finally. I know that doesn't cover it. I didn't know how far gone we were. I didn't realize you were already packing your heart away. I leaned against the wall, arms crossed. It wasn't just you not seeing me, Lena. It was me not seeing myself anymore. She nodded slowly, tears brimming, but not falling yet. You were always the one who stayed steady, even when I didn't deserve it. That's the problem. I kept holding on, even when you'd already let go. Silence filled the space again. But it wasn't the same silence as before. This one carried weight, consequence, memory. I never cheated, she blurted suddenly. I know you thought I did. I didn't flinch. I wasn't even sure I believed her. And weirdly, I wasn't sure it mattered anymore. Emotional distance can feel like betrayal, too. And sometimes the absence of love hurts more than the presence of betrayal. I thought a lot of things, I said. But in the end, it wasn't about what you did. It was about what you stopped doing. Lena's lip trembled. I miss you. I miss the version of us that used to exist, I said. But I don't think that version lives here anymore. Her tears fell then. Not loud sobs, just quiet, continuous streams that she didn't bother wiping away. I let them fall, let the moment breathe, because this wasn't the moment I came back. It was the moment I finally understood I wasn't going to. That night didn't end the way she probably imagined it would. There was no grand argument, no reunion, no dramatic confessions under dim lights. She stayed for an hour, maybe less. I don't even remember how long exactly. Time warped in that room like it always does when the air is thick with everything unsaid. She sat on the edge of the couch like a guest in someone else's life, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes moving across the walls like they were looking for parts of me she still recognized. But the truth is, she didn't know me anymore, and I wasn't sure I knew her either. There's a moment in every relationship where things change, not instantly, but irreversibly. And sometimes you don't even notice until you're too far gone. For us, I think that moment came sometime between the quiet dinners and the late-night glances at separate screens. I can't point to a single fight or mistake or betrayal that shattered it all. It was more like erosion, slow, invisible, but relentless. After she wiped her tears and realized I wasn't reaching to comfort her, she started talking more. Not excuses, just pieces of her thoughts like broken glass scattered across the floor. She told me she had been overwhelmed, that somewhere in her, she assumed I'd always be there. She admitted she resented how calm I stayed when she felt like she was falling apart, that it made her feel alone even while sitting next to me. But here's the part that stuck with me. She said she envied me, envied how I could be so steady, so composed even when everything was unraveling. I looked at her for a long time before responding, and when I finally spoke, my voice was quiet but certain. I wasn't steady, Lena. I was disappearing. That sentence sat in the room like fog, slowly filling the spaces between us. She didn't say much after that, and I didn't offer her hope because I wasn't sure I had any left to give. I walked her to the door, not like a lover seeing someone off, but like a man closing a chapter he never wanted to write in the first place. She lingered there for a second, and for a moment, I saw something in her eyes. Maybe it was regret, or maybe just fear of what came next. Do you think we'll ever find our way back? She asked. I wanted to give her something gentle, something kind, but I couldn't lie. Not anymore. I think we lost the map, I said softly. She nodded once, wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her hoodie, and walked out without another word. When the door closed, the silence didn't feel cold this time. Felt honest. That night I didn't cry. I didn't drink. I didn't try to numb the ache. I just sat there in the stillness and let it wash over me. The grief, the confusion, the strange relief of finally having said what I'd been carrying for too long. And slowly, quietly, I began to feel something else. Not peace. Not yet. But the beginning of something I hadn't felt in months. Myself. I didn't speak to Lena again for a while after that night. Not because I hated her. Not because I was trying to punish her. But because I needed to finally sit with myself and not her shadow. When you've spent years bending to someone else's emotional rhythm, constantly checking in on their moods, treading lightly around their silences, over-explaining your every move, you forget what your own voice sounds like. I didn't realize how much of myself I had muted until I was finally alone with the volume turned back up. I started waking early, not out of habit, but because I wanted to. The mornings were still and unhurried. I'd sit by the window with a mug of coffee that I brewed exactly the way I liked it, not the way she preferred. It's strange the tiny freedoms you rediscover after being emotionally caged for so long. Things like choosing your own toothpaste, playing music without worrying if she liked the song, leaving your socks wherever the hell you want. But even with all that, the loneliness hid in unexpected ways. Not always when I was sitting alone. Sometimes it was during the good parts. I'd laugh at a movie, instinctively look to my side to share it with someone, and find only empty space. I'd finish a long day at work and catch myself reaching for my phone to text her before remembering there was no us anymore to come home to. That's the thing no one tells you about walking away. It gives you clarity, but it also confronts you with how deeply your life had become tangled with someone else's story. Cutting loose isn't clean. It's jagged. And sometimes the bleeding doesn't start until after the exit. I didn't date. I didn't even consider it. Not because I wasn't curious, but because I knew I wasn't ready. The version of me that Lena had left behind wasn't someone I wanted to carry into a new connection. I needed to meet myself first. The version that didn't tiptoe, didn't compromise to the point of vanishing, didn't confuse being calm with being numb. So, I began writing again, something I hadn't done in years. Late at night, I'd sit down with a pen and fill notebooks with fragmented thoughts, old memories, questions I hadn't dared to ask myself. What did I want from love? Why had I stayed so long? Did I ever truly feel seen in that relationship? The more I wrote, the more I started finding answers. Not the tidy kind you'd share with a therapist or post about online, but the raw, embarrassing truths that you only admit to yourself in the dark. I also started talking to people I had lost touch with, friends I had drifted from because Lena hadn't liked them, or because it was just easier to keep the peace than to push back. One of them, Micah, invited me out to a small weekend hike with a few others. I almost said no, but I didn't. That day in the woods felt like the first time I took a full breath in years. No tension in my shoulders, no pretending, just laughter, open air, the kind of quiet that didn't ache, the kind that healed. The irony, I hadn't realized how much of my world had been shrunk down until I stepped outside of it. And just when I began to feel the slow stitching of my spirit coming back together, not perfect, not whole, but healing, that's when she came back again. A message out of nowhere. Not long, just one sentence. Can we talk? That was it. No explanation, no apology, no context. And even though I knew better, even though I had rebuilt enough of myself to know I didn't need her to complete the process, part of me still froze. Because the truth is, when someone has been part of your story for that long, their name alone can still make your pulse stutter. But this time, I wasn't the same man she left behind. And if she thought the door she once walked through was still open, she was going to learn that you can't leave the same way twice and expect the house to look the same. I didn't respond to her message right away. I saw it while brushing my teeth, standing in front of the bathroom mirror with a towel around my waist. The screen lit up on the counter and her name, just her name, cracked open something I thought I had already sealed shut. My heart didn't race. It slowed, like my body instinctively paused to make room for whatever was about to unfold. Can we talk? 3 words. No punctuation. Just soft enough to be human. Vague enough to be dangerous. I didn't sleep that night. I lay there staring at the ceiling while the past crept through the cracks like fog under a door. My brain tried to reason with my chest. I replayed our last conversation. Her tears, her silence, the things she said, and the heavier things she didn't. I remembered the sound of the door closing behind her and how for the first time in months I felt like the room had air again. And yet here I was, debating whether to open a door I had once closed with intention. The next morning I sat on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, staring at the message like it was a riddle only my soul could solve. I didn't want a reconciliation. That much I knew. But I couldn't deny there was still a thread, invisible maybe, but very real, that tied some part of me to the version of us we used to be. So I wrote back, not yes, not no. Just what do you want to say? The dots appeared instantly, typing, then disappearing, then silence. It was like she hadn't expected me to answer. Or maybe she didn't know what to say now that I had. A few minutes later, not over text. Please. I stared at the message. Part of me wanted to ignore it, block the number, erase the contact, change mine, disappear again, this time cleaner, sharper, final. But something in me knew I wouldn't. Not yet. I wasn't looking for closure. I just wasn't finished understanding what had really happened to us. We agreed to meet the next evening at a small cafe downtown. Neutral ground, public, but quiet. I hadn't been there since the early years when we still found excuses to hold hands under the table and split a dessert we both pretended we didn't want. Felt strange walking through those doors again. Alone, older, different. I arrived early, sat near the back. She was late. Classic Lena. I used to hate it. Now it just felt like part of the strange poetry of our downfall. When she finally walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. Not because she looked different, she didn't, but because I was seeing her from the other side of something irreversible. Her hair was pulled back in a loose braid. No makeup, a simple blue sweater that made her look younger somehow. She paused when she saw me, like she wasn't sure I'd really be there. She walked slowly to the table and sat across from me without saying anything. It was awkward, not tense, just hollow, like two people sitting in the ruins of a house they both once called home. We ordered coffee, talked about nothing at first. Work, her new apartment, mutual friends we both pretended not to miss. It felt polite, careful, like we were trying not to step on emotional landmines. But eventually, after a silence that felt heavier than all our words combined, she said it. I didn't know how to say it back then, she whispered. But I was lost. Not just with you, with myself. I said nothing. Let her continue. I didn't fall out of love with you, she added. I just stopped recognizing the life we were in. It felt like I had to perform happiness, like we were frozen versions of the people we used to be. She was crying now, but gently. No drama, no pleading. I blamed you for things that weren't your fault, she said. I resented you for not fixing what I couldn't even name. And when you left, I realized too late. You were the one thing I was sure of. I just didn't know how to hold on to something steady when I was falling apart. I took a long breath. Not because I was angry. I wasn't. I was just tired of carrying it all. Of wondering if it had all been my fault. Of questioning every moment we shared. And hearing her finally admit what I had suspected for years didn't bring peace. It brought something quieter than that. Acceptance. I loved you, Lena, I said. And I think you loved me too. But love without effort becomes memory. She nodded, wiping her eyes with the sleeve of her sweater. I didn't come here to ask for us back, she said. I came to ask if you hate me. That was the only part that caught me off guard. No, I said. I don't hate you, but I can't go back either. We sat there for a while. No more words. Just two people sitting in the stillness of what used to be. When we stood up to leave, she hugged me briefly, lightly. The kind of hug you give someone you'll never see the same way again. And when she walked out the door, I didn't watch her go. I just turned, paid the bill, and stepped out into the night with my hands in my pockets and something in my chest. Finally letting go. After that night at the cafe, I didn't hear from Lena again. Not a call, not a message, not even one of those accidental social media likes that feel like ghosts tapping on your shoulder. And strangely, I didn't wait for one either. I didn't sit by the phone. I didn't reread our conversations or check to see if she'd watch my stories. That season of my life, the one where I obsessed over someone else's attention, had finally ended, and I hadn't even realized it was happening. What followed wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a grand transformation or some cinematic moment where I looked in the mirror and declared I was a new man. It was smaller than that, slower, quieter. It was me waking up one morning and noticing I didn't feel heavy. It was actually laughing, at a dumb podcast while folding laundry and realizing I didn't have to feel guilty for being okay. It was the first night I came home and didn't instinctively reach for the light she used to leave on. I started cooking again, real food, not just frozen pizza or whatever was fast. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I just wanted to eat like I mattered. I started going for walks in the evening. No destination, just a path and the hum of the streetlights. I found a secondhand bike and fixed it up over a few weekends, greasing the chain, adjusting the brakes, remembering how it felt to move with purpose. I joined a book club of all things. Me, a guy who hadn't read anything longer than a news article in years. But I liked the quiet rhythm of it. Sitting with strangers, hearing them talk about stories that had nothing to do with my own. And little by little, I stopped thinking about her. Not in a bitter way, not even in a sad way, just like how you stop thinking about a room in a house you no longer live in. I started noticing things again, like how I liked my coffee a little stronger than she used to make it. Like how I'd always loved late-night thunderstorms, but never really listened to them because they made her anxious. I realized I used to rush through showers because she'd complain about the water bill. And now I took my time, letting the steam wrap around me like a fresh start. These weren't big rebellions. They were recoveries. Quiet declarations of, "I'm still here," whispered into the everyday. One Sunday morning, I walked into a small bookstore while it was raining. I had no plan to be there. I was just escaping the downpour. The place smelled like old pages and wood polish, and the clerk barely looked up as I stepped in, shaking water from my jacket. I wandered for a bit, picking up titles I'd never heard of, and then I saw her. Not Lena, not anyone from my past. Just a woman sitting on the floor between two shelves, legs crossed, totally absorbed in a book like the world around her didn't exist. I didn't speak to her, didn't even catch her name. But for a moment, I watched her and realized I wasn't afraid of what might come next. I didn't need to chase love to feel alive. I didn't need someone else's validation to matter. I had survived a quiet unraveling and stitched myself back together, thread by thread, in the silence Lena left behind. Some nights I still think about her, not in longing, but with perspective. I think we loved each other in the way people do when they're still trying to love themselves desperately, clumsily, incompletely. And that's okay. Not all stories are meant to go the distance. Some just teach you how to walk again after you've forgotten. That chapter is closed. And for the first time in years, I'm not trying to rewrite it. I'm just ready to write the next one slowly, carefully, and entirely on my own terms. People talk about moving on like it's a decision you make, a switch you flip. You get hurt, you take time, then one day you move on. But I've learned that real healing isn't something you do. It's something that happens around you slowly when you stop trying to force it. I didn't wake up one morning full of confidence or clarity. It didn't happen because I started jogging or went on a trip or met someone new. It happened in the way a wound closes, not with ceremony, but with time, breath, and a little bit of sunlight that you don't even realize is there until you stop flinching every time you move. My new life, if that's what I can call it, didn't look like a fresh start. It looked like learning to live inside of stillness. It looked like turning down invitations I would have accepted out of guilt. It looked like walking into my apartment and not immediately feeling the emptiness, but instead seeing space that I could fill with things that felt like me. I started going to a pottery studio a few blocks from my place. A coworker had mentioned it in passing and I signed up without overthinking it. The first few classes were awkward. My hands were clumsy, the wheel moved too fast, and the clay never took the shape I imagined in my head. But I kept going, not because I was good at it, but because it forced me to be patient with myself. It was the first time I'd ever made something with no one else's opinion in mind. And then came the strange part. People started noticing. Not the pottery. Me. A barista at the corner coffee shop asked if I wanted to join a neighborhood film group. A guy at the gym who I'd casually nodded to for months introduced me to his friends after a pickup basketball game. Someone invited me to a rooftop dinner where I met a woman named Jordan. She didn't remind me of Lena. She wasn't better or worse. She was just herself. And for once, I didn't feel like I had to compare anyone to anyone. Jordan was sharp, funny, a little awkward in a way that made her feel real. We talked for over an hour before I even realized I was smiling. Really smiling in a way I hadn't since long before the goodbye that never came. But here's the truth. I wasn't ready for anything serious. Not yet. And for the first time in my life, I was okay admitting that. I didn't ghost her. I didn't lead her on. I just told the truth, that I was still getting used to the sound of my own thoughts again, and I wasn't going to rush into anything just to fill the silence. She understood more than I expected. She said, "Healing doesn't make you weak. Taking your time makes you honest." That line stuck with me. I'm not writing this to pretend I have everything figured out. I don't. I still catch myself doubting. Still fight moments where the old version of me, the one who prioritized everyone else's comfort over his own voice, tries to resurface. But now I recognize it, and that's everything. I'm not the same man who left without saying goodbye. And I'm not the man who would wait by the door hoping someone would knock just to prove he was still worth loving. I'm not waiting anymore. I'm building. I'm listening. And for the first time, I'm choosing to belong to myself before trying to belong to anyone else. There are moments in life that don't feel like turning points until long after they pass. You don't feel the change as it happens. You just wake up one day, months later, and realize you've been breathing differently. You're walking lighter. You haven't looked backward in weeks. And in that moment, it hits you. You didn't just survive something. You've become someone else because of it. Lena and I haven't spoken since that cafe. I'm not angry. I'm not waiting. I don't replay the old conversations in my head anymore, trying to twist them into something softer. That chapter has closed. Not with bitterness, but with the peace that comes when you finally stop needing someone else's version of the story to make sense of your own. And here's the truth I've grown into. Not all relationships are meant to last. Some are meant to shake you, to challenge you, to reveal parts of yourself you didn't know were sleeping. Lena taught me that love alone isn't enough. That effort, attention, and honesty aren't optional. They're the oxygen that keeps connection alive. And when it's gone, it suffocates both people quietly, even if they smile through it. But I also learned this. You don't need closure from someone who wasn't capable of offering it. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away. Not out of anger, but out of respect for yourself. Leaving without a goodbye wasn't about revenge. It was about release. I stopped needing to be understood by the person who let me slip through their fingers. And in doing so, I began to understand myself. These days, I'm not chasing a new relationship. I'm not obsessed with fixing anything. I'm building a life that feels like mine. I've reconnected with people who make me feel grounded. I've carved out spaces that give me peace. And most importantly, I've stopped apologizing for needing room to grow. There's this myth that strength looks like stoicism, like silence, like never breaking down. But real strength is quieter than that. It's waking up every day and choosing not to go backward even when it would be easier. The sitting with yourself in the quiet, feeling the weight of everything you carried, and deciding to keep going anyway. That's what I've learned. You don't have to prove your worth to someone who couldn't see it. You don't have to stay small to keep someone else comfortable. You don't have to beg for the love you already gave so freely. If someone couldn't meet you there, it's not your job to drag them across the finish line. It's your job to keep walking one step, one deep breath, one ordinary day at a time. And then someday you'll look around at the books you've read, the people you've met, the meals you've cooked, the sunrises you've stood beneath, and realize that the life you were building in pieces is now something whole, something steady, something yours. That's what happened to me. And if you're reading this and you're still in the thick of it, still hurting, still wondering if you'll ever feel whole again, I promise you the day will come when your pain is no longer the loudest voice in the room. You'll find peace not in the apology that never came, but in the strength you built while waiting for it. You'll find love, maybe in someone else, maybe just in the quiet safety of your own reflection. but it will be real and it will stay. Not because you fought to be enough for someone else, but because you finally became enough for yourself. And that is the kind of goodbye that doesn't hurt anymore. That is the kind that sets you free.